Hello and welcome. This is the first lecture recording on PowerPoint um, for our class, Human Services 1, Introduction to Social Work. Just to verify, I want to make sure you guys are looking at the correct video. This recording is for class week 6, March 18th, 2020. We will be covering topic number 5, diversity in social work practice. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. To start, we'll go ahead and just do a quick review and a couple of reminders. I want to be clear that the syllabus on Canvas will be having changes that are not properly documented on the current syllabus. In light of our class transitioning to an online platform due to the COVID-19 outbreak, there are some things that are going to be changing, some due dates. For example, the journals we might have to cut out. We will be focusing on talking more and more about how the research project will be changing. My grading system will be far more relaxed. I realize that there are so many different things that a lot of you guys may be experiencing in light of the coronavirus outbreak right now, such as changes in your work schedule, financial security, family, if you guys have kids. So please communicate with me if there are any due dates or projects or things that you guys are having difficulty in completing. If you guys do not have access to internet and don't know how to access Canvas, please let me know. I want to try to work with you guys as much as possible. The midterm, to be clear, will be on Canvas. Next week we will be discussing that far more in our lecture and going over the midterm more in detail, and what you guys can expect and how it'll look like on Canvas. At this point, because we are going to an online system, it will be open book. We just kind of have to work with what we have. Next week, we will be having a guest speaker join me in the video lecture, and we'll go over that a bit more at the end. Okay, if you guys have any questions about any of these reminders, please comment below or go ahead and send me an email. Just a quick review. Last week, we talked about the term privilege. Just to review the definition we used. By privilege, we discussed it being a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. We did a little bit of a privilege walk and talked about different forms of privilege that people may experience, or different forms of privilege that you yourself may have experienced. For those who participated in the class activity, you had the opportunity to submit a survey response by email to me for extra credit points. So thank you for those who were able to submit that. You should see it added to your grade toward the end of the semester. If you have any questions about that, I don't see it at some point and you submitted it, go ahead and send me an email. I'm tracking those submissions as I've received them. All right, so we'll go ahead and jump on in. So for topic number 4, reading review, this was for the last readings that were due. I kept this one a bit smaller, and you know what? I'm noticing that I am covering the PowerPoint. So I'm going to take it off for just a second. All right, so topic number 4, reading review. The reading talked about a person and environment perspective. So this perspective is part of thinking of people as constantly interacting with their environment, such as school, work, family, church, faith. So in social work practice, in the healthcare system, in fact, human services and social services, we have tried to move more toward a person and environment perspective. trying to understand how people are affected both positively and negatively by their surroundings. So to give an example of that, I want you guys to think about how people are currently adapting to new surroundings and changes in their environment in response to COVID-19. So how has the coronavirus impacted you guys as individuals, your community, the school, the world? Notice how we have to look at people and students as part of a larger system. If we at LBCC did not take into account how you guys as students might be affected by the coronavirus, maybe we wouldn't have taken into account that some of you guys are affected by the schools closing, and not just community college schools, but K through 12 schools. If you guys are parents or even siblings, you know, how might that affect you? So with that in mind is why we at LBCC have been encouraged to be a bit more flexible with our due dates, because I cannot assume that all of you guys are going to continue to be available to come into a 6 to 9 Wednesday only class, taking into account that the coronavirus epidemic and the coronavirus pandemic right now has affected you guys in so many different ways. So that's just to give you guys a little bit of an example of what a person and environment perspective means. It's looking at people as part of a larger environment, understanding that an individual is affected by family, by school, by work, by faith, by finances, by the economy, by health. There's so many different things that affect the individual, as well as the individual affecting those different things. So it's kind of an inward and outward perspective. All right, so that was just part of the reading. If you haven't gotten a chance to look at that, please go ahead and read it. It is going to be on the midterm. All right, the reading talks a little bit about the importance of advocacy. So we are in week 6. Between week 1 and week 5, we've been talking about various different topics that all interrelate. You know, being more self-aware of your own bias, being aware of social inequalities, being aware of privilege, being aware of the opportunities some people have while others have not. So why is advocacy so important? So the purpose of advocacy in the field of social work is to continue to uplift and empower and fight against social inequalities that we know are present and that we know are still affecting vulnerable communities, which social workers primarily work with. By social inequality, we're referring to the unequal distribution of wealth, of goods, of access to things. The reading talks a little bit about client self-determination, which is an individual's right to make decisions for themselves. So that's just a little bit of a quick summary of the readings from topic number 4. We'll go over how these terms are going to be in the midterm in next week's class. All right, so now let's go into the term of the week for this week, which is cultural humility. The definition that I got is from online Google. It is not from the book, but it is something you are going to have to know for the midterm. So by cultural humility, we are referring to the, quote, ability to maintain an interpersonal stance that is other-oriented or open to the other person in relation to aspects of cultural identity that are most important to the person. What does that mean? That's a lot of words and it sounds a little bit jumbled. Basically, it's being humble, being open to learning about another person's culture, not assuming you know or understand what another person's culture or experience has been, but instead being curious, being available to want to learn, to want to get answers from the person. So in the past, in the field of social work, we used to talk about cultural competence, which you see on this right-hand side. And we are trying to move toward seeing culture and wanting to learn about other people's culture from a more cultural humility perspective. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference. Cultural competence refers to someone's knowledge. So if I am competent in math, it means I understand math, I know math, I have knowledge in math. If I am approaching math from a more humble perspective, I might be more open to learning new things, more open to the idea that I don't know everything and that I am curious and willing to learn more. So when we talk about competence and humility in the topic of culture, the difference is that if we assume we are culturally competent, we come in with this idea that we know it all. You know, oh, I studied Asian American studies. I'm competent in Asian American studies. I'm competent in Asian American culture. I know what that culture experiences. I know the history. So if I come in with a perspective, or if I come in with this idea that I know Asian American culture, I may not be open to learning about it from my client's perspective. I may not be open to the idea that I don't know it all. Cultural humility, the idea of taking this culturally humble approach, is that we are open to this lifelong learning process. What that means is coming in with this idea that I'm not an expert and I will never be an expert in this individual's life. So I am a Hispanic female, right? So I might come in with this idea that I'm culturally competent in Hispanic culture. I am Hispanic. I am a female. I know what you're experiencing. Yeah, I know it all. But it's also important to recognize that it is important to be culturally humble, even when you're working with somebody who does have a lot of resemblance or a lot of similarities to you and your own culture. Because my own experience may not be the same as that of somebody else. We talked a little bit about that in the privilege walk, for example. So understanding that we all come from different privileges, we all come from different backgrounds, even though we're all in the same place now, right? Even though we were all in the same classroom at this time, we all took different paths and routes to get there. So assuming that who you're working with has the same experience as you is not always fair. So I encourage you guys, as you go on to work with people, as you go on into the fields of human services, to think about it. You know, think about being culturally humble in any interaction that you experience. So let's go over a little bit more about some of those differences. So cultural humility. So we are, let's see if you guys can see. We are over here right now. Okay. So with cultural humility, we are talking about it being a lifelong learning process. We are talking about not being an expert, but instead being curious and acknowledge the differences that other people have in comparison to you. We are acknowledging and being self-aware that the client is the expert in their own culture, in their own life. We are not. Similarly, though, both cultural humility and cultural competence try to present sensitivity and appreciation for diversity. What does that mean? So both of these terms, or both of these perspectives, have come about by this idea of wanting to be sensitive to other people's culture, wanting to appreciate the diversity in working with human beings. The big difference is that by taking this understanding or perspective that I'm going to be culturally humble in working in this field, is you are acknowledging that you are a lifelong learner. So I've been working in the field of social work for 5 to 8 years now. But if I go into my job thinking that I am an expert, I know it all. I'm a professor now. I'm a teacher. I know what I'm doing. I may not be open to learning new things. I may not be open to being challenged. I may not be open to acknowledging that the people I come in contact with, the clients I come in contact with, may have had different experiences than what I might be familiar with. So I encourage you guys to think about cultural humility in the work you do now, or in the careers you hope to pursue. You know, how can you be culturally humble? How can you continue to be a lifelong learner? How can you continue to see the person you are working with as the expert and learn from their experience? Versus cultural competence, this idea that you have to learn and be skilled and knowledgeable and have expertise in whatever area you're going to be working in. So for example, I know a couple of you are interested in pursuing substance use counseling. If you pursue this idea of becoming an expert in that field, you might miss out on the opportunity to continue to learn new things. I mean, there's new things that we're learning in the field of social work all the time. So cultural competence refers to this ongoing commitment of, I'm going to go get trainings. I'm going to continue to learn. I'm going to continue to learn about the values and traditions and customs and ways of thinking and behaviors of the clients I'm going to be working with, which is great. You know, we want everyone to continue to seek knowledge, but going about it in the sense of, you are not doing it to become an expert. You are doing to build understanding so that you can continue to learn about your clients' experiences, would be my suggestion. So that is the term of the week, cultural humility. And as we go into week 6 topic of diversity in the field of social work, I want you to think about how you can practice cultural humility. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump on to the next slide. Okay, so what influences culture? Well, what is culture? You know, culture is not solely in relation to race or heritage. Culture is influenced by a multitude of things. So if you see here some of the colors that I'm going to use the color white. Let's see. So if you see here, culture refers to language. Culture is influenced by belief systems. Culture is influenced by attitudes, by art, drama, music, food, faith, religion, behaviors, rituals, and customs. So these are just some of the things that affect or influence culture. So let's talk about Long Beach culture, right? Long Beach culture has a very specific culture to it, right? What are some of the common foods you might find in Long Beach? Well, we're by the ocean, right? So you'll find a lot of seafood, depending on where you're at. You can also find a lot of Cambodian food, depending on if you go to kind of the Cambodian community part of Long Beach. You can also find a lot of Hispanic food. If maybe you go more toward North Long Beach or possibly West Side Long Beach, you can find some soul food in Long Beach. You can also find a lot of bars, right? So there is a certain type of culture within Long Beach as a city alone. What are some of the common customs within Long Beach? Well, Long Beach is a very diverse community, but there are certain things within the city of Long Beach that other cities may not necessarily have, such as a Pride Festival, the Grand Prix. So just to give you guys an idea of the various different things that influence culture. Now, we were talking about Long Beach as a Long Beach culture. Let's get a little smaller than that. Let's go into the culture within Long Beach City College. Okay, so Long Beach City College might have a culture different from the culture of Long Beach City. Long Beach City College Has a very supportive culture, right? I know that we have the Viking Vault, which offers food to students. We have night classes, we have the library open late hours. Some of the culture within the campus is to have enough activities for students to try to get you guys engaged in clubs. We have we use email. We're very technology savvy within Long Beach City College. You guys all get OneDrive access, Outlook access. So this is just to give you a little bit of an idea of what culture can be influenced by. I want you to think about what your culture is, in your home. So what is the culture in your household? What is the language you guys speak? Is it a bilingual household? Is it a monolingual household? What are some of the customs you guys practice within your household culture? So for example, does everyone eat dinner together? Is that a common custom? Or do different people eat at different times depending on who comes home at what time? Rituals, are there any rituals such as, not necessarily faith or religious based rituals. Rituals can be different things. So for example, in my household, whoever gets home first from work has to go walk the dogs. That's just a ritual in our house. What are some of the common behaviors within your household? So for example, are there elders in your household that are given a certain level of respect or priority? How can you behave during dinner time? How are you able to behave right before bedtime? What are the behaviors that are allowed, or the rituals that are allowed within the culture of your home? What faith or religion practices do you have within the culture of your home? So for example, I was raised Catholic, and even though I may not be a strong practicing Catholic, I celebrate Christmas, right? So that definitely plays a culture within my household during the holidays. We have our Christmas tree up, we decorate. Food, what are the food that we eat in your household? Is it based on your heritage? So for example, do you come from a Salvadorian background where the food you eat is very, very typical Salvadorian food? Or are you more Americanized, where maybe you're third, fourth, fifth generation and you might have a mix or blends of food? Do you cook more home-cooked food, or do you buy food more often? And how does that affect the culture within your household? Art, drama, music. What is the kind of music you listen to at home? Do you guys have a lot of art on the walls, or maybe family pictures? How does that affect your family culture? Attitudes. So what are the attitudes you guys have toward each other? Is there a hierarchy? Is one person kind of the head of the household and then other people below it? Is it more of a group communal attitude in the house, meaning we all share things, we all share the same chores, we all share the same rules, we all share the same expectations? What are some of the belief systems within your home? So these are all just some of the various different things that influence culture that I'd like you to think about, not only for yourself, but how might that differ when you are working with clients. So we talked about how cultural humility is you wanting to learn, right? This idea that you are going to be a continuous learner, that you are not the expert in the person you are working with's life. You are not an expert in their life. So even though you might share some similarities with somebody's culture, such as language or possibly faith or possibly heritage, right? Oh, we're both Mexican American. You have to understand that there's so many different things that affect culture or that influence culture that may make that person's experience different from yours. So even though you may have something similar with an individual you come in contact with, such as language, maybe their rituals are different, or their customs are different, or their attitudes are different depending on what generation they're from, right? Or when they migrated to this country. Or maybe English is your primary language, and it wasn't theirs, so how might that be different? And why is it important for you to keep an open mind and understand that though you have similarities with someone's culture, you are not an expert in their specific cultural experience. Now, and we're talking about here having similarities with somebody else's culture. What if you're working with someone that you have no understanding of their culture? Well, understanding what influences culture might be a good way for you to start in terms of what do you need to learn? What do you need to learn about this individual's culture to help you connect with them? So let's say you are working with someone who is Vietnamese. First generation Vietnamese, immigrated here, they speak very little language, and you can't understand their behavior. Why are they not looking you in the eye? Well, it might be important to understand and learn about this person's culture, because eye contact in Vietnamese culture is not common, it's not comfortable. So when I have worked at hospitals and I come in contact with Vietnamese families, I've had to learn that even though I may be working with a client who is a female, if there is a male in the room, I may need to direct my questions to the male in the room, because that is very commonly part of the culture. Or why maybe working with a Vietnamese family, they may feel odd or uncomfortable in talking to me because I am a female, and how might that affect how I work with this individual or with this family. So having a little bit of understanding and knowledge about the different things that affect culture will help you in knowing how you can connect. What is it that you need to learn about this individual, about the family you're working with, and how can that be helpful for you to be able to better understand and learn how to be helpful to them. All right, so let's go ahead and move on. All right, so let's talk about the observable and not observable aspects of culture. So if you look here, we're going to refer to this as the culture iceberg. So if you guys have ever seen Titanic, this is similar to that. It's a big piece of ice somewhere in the Antarctic Ocean. Okay, so if you see the tip of the iceberg up here, this is what is observable. Okay, so this is what you can see. So when we talk about the culture iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, what is above the water, that is what you can see. But there are deeper things of culture that you may not be able to see. And why this is important is that you may need to get to know a person a bit more in order to learn more about some of those deep culture aspects. So we're going to look at this a bit more in detail. Let's look at the surface culture, the observable culture aspects. So some things that you might be able to learn or observe or see about a person's culture that are more obvious are food, right? You may be able to learn very quickly what a person's common foods are. Flags, right? You may learn about somebody's culture based on the flag. Festivals, if they celebrate certain festivals. So if you're working with a Brazilian family and you know that they celebrate Carnaval, that's something you can observe, something you can see. Holidays, that might be something you can observe and see and learn about somebody's culture right away. Music, some of the games they play, the language they speak, arts and crafts, performances, fashion. So all of those things at the top, in the white tip of the iceberg are surface culture, observable aspects. But then there's things that you may not be able to see that might be important for you to just keep in mind. And that is what we are looking at in the green area, the deep culture, what is underlying under the water. So things you don't see that influence culture might be communication styles and rules. So for example, these are things that somebody may not be able to explain to you, and it may not be as obvious, but they are part of culture commonly. So facial expressions, gestures, right? Some cultures speak very loud with their hands. So I'm thinking like Italian culture is very commonly using their hands. Eye contact, depending on some cultures, eye contact can be seen as rude or confrontational, or lack of eye contact can also be seen as rude or passive, depending on the culture. Body language, or do you stand tall, big, and strong, and is that significant in some cultures versus other cultures, maybe more passive or looking downward more, or how you, if you cross your arms, is that going to be seen as rude? Think of body language as sign language, right? Flipping somebody off in American culture can be seen as rude, but pointing in American culture may not. While pointing the finger in other cultures, particularly in some European cultures, can be very rude. In fact, that can be a sign of flipping somebody off. Other things to keep in mind that are considered parts of culture that may not be as observable or obvious. Personal space, right? How close somebody gets to you, or how comfortable they feel being close to you. So that's important if you're running a group, for example, and you have individuals and you're expecting everyone to be okay with sitting in a circle really close to each other, and maybe somebody feels uncomfortable doing that. That's not comfortable for them. It's not part of their normal cultural practice. So you might see somebody wanting to sit in the back of the room. Handling and displaying of emotions. So how we talk about emotions, how we express emotions can be very much affected by culture, depending on the culture. Tone of voice, right? How loud you speak. Think about when you talk to an elder. Depending on the culture, it may not be okay to speak to an elder with a high, stern tone of voice. So things that are not as obvious or observable but are still influenced by culture are what is seen underneath the iceberg, and then the tip of the iceberg is the behaviors or the observable or the obvious things that we may be able to associate to culture differences and diversity. All right, so I'll let you guys take a look at this a little bit more, and I want you to think about, what are some of the deep culture aspects, beliefs, concept, notions, or attitudes that your own culture, your own household, that you notice. What are some of the unspoken rules in your house that are influenced by your culture? Versus what are some of the more obvious things that you see or encounter in your culture? What are some of the foods or festivals or holidays that you celebrate? So think about this. I want you guys to look at this iceberg and ask yourself, are there some unspoken rules in my culture that aren't so obvious? And what are some of the obvious cultural rules? So go ahead and move on to the next slide. So in the topic of diversity in social work practice, as I mentioned, in social work in the past, we used to talk about cultural competence. We talked in the first 2 weeks of class about some of the rules and guidelines that social workers follow based on the National Association of Social Work, kind of like our Bill of Rights, right? So cultural competence used to be part of our rules and guidelines in social work. It's recently changed to, instead of the goal being to reach cultural competence, cultural knowledge, cultural expertise, we now strive toward being more culturally aware and wanting to strive towards social diversity. So being more aware about the different cultures and diversity, being more respectful about the differences in cultures and the differences in people's experiences, being more aware about the social diversity that we may encounter. So that is a recent change within the field of social work that I thought would be interesting to bring up. The rationale for this change was based on literature, and this is directly from the NASW, National Association of Social Work website. So the reason why they made this change is based on literature and research and discussions about whether it was realistic for social workers to become competent experts in all cultures, and research showed that it wasn't. It's not realistic for any one of us to become an expert in different cultures and different people's lives. So based on that research, the NASW, the National Association of Social Workers, realized that instead of trying to be experts in social diversity, we should strive toward teaching social workers to want to seek knowledge, to want to improve their skills, to want to improve their self-awareness, and improve their ability to meet people's diverse cultural needs based on individual backgrounds. So the reason why diversity in social work practice is such an important topic for us to talk about in this class is that social workers or people in fields of human services, people in fields of social services, you're going to come in contact with people, groups, communities of different cultural backgrounds. That's just a fact, just in Long Beach alone. In this class alone, right? In our class alone, we have different cultures based on age, heritage, race, maybe even primary language, right? So thinking about why it's important to be aware of the diverse needs of population in the field is important. Thinking about, being aware of your own differences in culture and how it's diverse from the people you're working with can help you tailor how you communicate, what questions you ask, how you treat people, and how you build relations with others. So that is why the topic of diversity is so important in social work practice, because we are going to encounter people of various different cultures in this field, in the field of human services. We just are. There are going to be differences. Even if you are, let's say, an African American working with only African American communities, you're still going to encounter diversity. Diversity in age, possibly diversity in heritage, diversity in food, diversity in customs, in faith and religion. So just because you may think you look or you may think you understand a person doesn't necessarily mean you share the same culture. There is beauty in diversity, and diversity is far more complex than just race and ethnicity. So I want you guys to think about the field you're interested in working with and ask yourself, what might be some cultural diversity experiences that you may encounter, and how is it that in practicing cultural humility, wanting to learn about people's differences in culture, may be helpful to you as you pursue that career choice. All right, so we're about 40 minutes into our lecture. I want to take time to just remind you guys of Research Project 1 in terms of APA guidelines. So again, it is due this week, week 6. Your essay should be typed. It should be double-spaced on regular paper size with 1-inch margins. If you are using Word, it should automatically be set up that way. Please make sure to use the same font throughout your entire paper, not making titles or headings bigger or smaller than others. Just use the same font throughout your paper that falls in line with APA guidelines. If you can add a header at the top of your paper with a title of your choice and your name and the page numbers, that is preferred. I'm not going to be a stickler on that. I just want to give you guys some understanding of what APA looks like, because again, this is a transferable class, and four-year universities, specifically schools of social work, will be using APA formatting. So from Research Part 1, I will be giving you feedback on any of your APA formatting so that you can practice improving that for Part 2, which we will talk about more next week. In the next 2 weeks, sorry. So I'm going to bring down my picture so we can just go over the parts again. So right now we are on Part A. Research Project Part 1, remember, it can be written in first person. Research Project Part 1 is you essentially introducing to me what the agency or type of social work field that you are going to be using for your project. So what is the agency you picked? You know, I picked the Long Beach Rescue Mission that is located in downtown Long Beach, and they offer X, Y, and Z services. The program I'm going to be focusing on is their meal program. This is their mission statement. Their mission statement should be in the agency website. If your agency you've chosen does not have a website, that is a problem. You're going to have a hard time finding some of the information you need for Part 1. So you still have time to reach out to me all day tomorrow, Wednesday, and if you need help with anything, please let me know. Okay. Part B is you giving a little bit of information about the community the agency is in. Is it in California? Is it in another state? Demographics refers to just where is it located? Tell me a little bit about where the agency is located. Is where the agency located the same community that they provide services to? You know, your agency office may be in Orange County, but maybe they provide services to people only in Santa Ana, for example. One research resource is required for this. So for example, if your agency is in the city of Long Beach, go to the City of Long Beach website, get me a couple of information about what Long Beach City population is like, and that can be your research resource for that one. Okay, Part C, over here now. Part C, why did you choose that agency? What about that agency or social worker or field or population? You know, what about it interested you? Was it the one that stood out, the one that seemed most interesting, or is that maybe a population you're interested in learning more about, or maybe a population you want to potentially work with? Tell me a little bit about why you picked that one. If you had the opportunity to talk to the social worker from that agency, what are some questions you want to ask that social worker? What are some things that you've already noticed you want to learn more about? Just write out 2 questions, and you can literally jot that down as a couple of questions I have for the social worker include the following. 1, how does your agency get funding? 2, what is the most interesting thing about your agency? So what are some questions? What are some questions you would like to ask your social worker? Because though I'm going to be giving you a list of questions you guys can use, I'd also want you guys to come up with a couple questions for your you might have for the social worker yourself. So the last part of how you're going to be graded was your research project part 1 to 2 pages? Was it grammatically edited and APA formatted? So that is your research project part 1. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. And lastly, to finish off for today, as I mentioned in the beginning of the lecture and in the discussion post for week 6, we will have a guest speaker, Yvette Guzman. She is our first guest speaker for the semester. And though I am trying to figure out how we are going to continue to have guest speakers throughout the rest of the semester, we're going to see how this works out. So what I am going to do is I will be meeting up with Yvette and recording an interview with her, just as I am right here. Just as I'm recording myself into this PowerPoint, I will be recording an interview with Yvette, and I will be asking her some questions. You know, the benefit of having guest speakers is for you guys to have the opportunity to ask different social workers questions and learn about their process. You can ask them what it was like to transfer, what it was for anybody who maybe has experience in going to community college first. You can ask them why they decided to go into social work. You can ask them why they chose the field they're working in, or why they chose their undergraduate degree of choice. So for example, Yvette Guzman has a Bachelor in Human Services. This is a Human Services class. This class transfers to Cal State Fullerton's Human Services Bachelor degree program. So if that's a school you're interested in going to, maybe you have some questions about that. You know, what was it like? What were your classes like? What were some classes that you enjoyed the most? How did you go from a Bachelor in Human Services to the Peace Corps? What was it like to do international work? So Yvette Guzman got her Bachelor in Human Services, then did the Peace Corps in Ecuador, where she worked with older adults, and I'll let her talk more about her experience there. She worked with older adults there. I think she created like a senior center, community center of sort, and then she came back to California and went out to get her master's of social work. And now she works for Healthcare Partners in one of their skilled nursing facilities. So I gave a little spiel right here to tell you a little bit about her. The way you will get attendance credit for this week's class is I am asking you to comment on week 6, the week 6 post, a question for Yvette Guzman. You don't have to put multiple questions. If you have multiple questions, feel free. But as long as you can post one question to ask her before the end of tomorrow, March 18th, which is our regular class day, you will get full attendance credit for week 6. All right. if you guys have any questions about that, you can also comment on there or send me an email. I will make sure to be available by email throughout Wednesday, which is our normal class day, so that I can answer any questions you guys may have as quickly as possible. I want to thank you all for your flexibility. I know this is the first time we're trying out this video lecture style. I apologize if the volume goes up and down throughout the lecture. I will review it and see how it sounds, and hopefully be able to fix any glitches that you guys may have found. If this is too hard, if you guys are noticing, hey, this is not a lecture style that works for us, is there any other option? Let me know as well. I don't know whether this is going to work unless you guys tell me. So we have completed week 6. In addition to this lecture in PowerPoint, given that our class is 3 hours long, I have also added 2 different TED Talk videos that talk about diversity from a different perspective, to give you guys a different take, a different perspective on what diversity can look like. One of them talks about looking at diversity within a community based on what people tweet or what people search online. He talks about how you can see the differences and the diversity and community within the same city just based on people's posts and online tweets. Another one of the TED Talk videos that I posted talks about diversity from a personal perspective. So I hope you guys enjoy those. They're fun to watch, they're not too long, and it's to give you a different perspective on social work and diversity practice. So thank you guys again, and make sure to post your comment to get full credit for the attendance, and make sure to get your research project part 1 submitted. If you guys have any questions on that, please let me know. Thank you guys. Next week we will be going over the midterm, and I will be explaining what to expect from the midterm on Canvas. All right, thank you everyone.